John Carter stood at the window of his small apartment, watching the alien ships hover in the sky above Chicago. They had been there for 3 days now, silent and waiting. Not attacking, not communicating, just watching. The ships were smooth and silver, shaped like perfect discs that reflected the sunlight. They were beautiful in a cold, distant way. "They're still there," he said to his wife, Kate, who sat at the kitchen table clutching a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "The news says there are ships like this over every major city now," Kate replied, her voice quiet and steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Over 200 of them worldwide." John nodded. He had been following the reports too. The world's militaries had tried everything: fighter jets, missiles, even nuclear weapons. Nothing worked. The missiles vanished before impact. The fighter jets lost power when they got too close. The nuclear weapons simply failed to detonate. The first real communication came on the 4th day. Every screen on Earth, televisions, computers, phones, even electronic billboards, showed the same image. A being that looked almost human except for its pale blue skin and large black eyes. "People of Earth," the being said in perfect English, though its mouth moved strangely with the words. "I am Ambassador Sorthal of the Galactic Conclave. We represent a federation of over 300 species across the Milky Way. We have been observing your planet for many centuries, and the time has come for formal integration." John and Kate listened as the ambassador explained that the Galactic Conclave had held a vote regarding Earth's status. By a vote of 276 to 8, Earth had been designated a Class C labor planet. "This designation means your species will provide valuable labor services to more advanced civilizations," the ambassador continued. "In return, you will receive technological knowledge, medical advancements, and protection under Conclave law. This is standard procedure for planets at your development stage." "They're talking about slavery," Kate whispered, her hand finding John's. "They're using fancy words, but they're talking about enslaving humanity." Over the next week, the collective, as they called themselves, began their takeover. It wasn't violent in the way humans had imagined alien invasions. There were no death rays or mass destruction. Instead, it was more like a company restructuring, clinical, efficient, and unstoppable. The way aliens set up processing centers in major cities. Humans were required to register, undergo testing, and receive assignment based on their skills and physical abilities. Those who refused or resisted were not killed. The aliens had weapons that caused intense pain without leaving marks, or induced temporary paralysis. After experiencing these, most people complied. Susan Miller had been an aerospace engineer before the invasion. She had helped design components for NASA and dreamed of seeing humans reach Mars one day. Now she stood in line at the Chicago Processing Center, watching as people ahead of her were scanned, tested, and assigned numbers. When her turn came, the alien operator, a slender being with 4 arms and skin that changed color slightly as it moved, placed a device against her forehead. Susan felt a strange tingling sensation as it scanned her brain. Subject displays advanced mathematical cognition and engineering aptitude, the alien said to its assistant. Suitable for technical labor category 2. Susan was given a metal bracelet that could not be removed and told to report to the spaceport being constructed outside the city in 3 days. She would be among the first humans sent to work on other planets. "My family," Susan said, her voice shaking. "My husband and daughter. Family units with skills will be kept together when possible," the alien replied without emotion. "Your offspring is too young for labor assignment. Your mate lacks technical skills but shows adequate physical capabilities for basic labor. He will be assigned separately." "Please," Susan begged. "We need to stay together." The alien's skin darkened slightly. What Susan would later learn was their equivalent of annoyance. "If you comply with your assignment, your family members will receive better rations and living conditions. This is the standard incentive structure." In another part of Chicago, Alan Reeves watched the processing center from a distance. A former Marine who had served in Afghanistan, Alan had known immediately that conventional resistance would be useless against the aliens' technology. But he also knew that no occupied people in human history had ever gained freedom without fighting for it. Alan had started gathering others who refused to register. They hid in abandoned buildings and the old subway tunnels. Most were former military or police, but there were also engineers, doctors, and ordinary people who simply refused to become slaves. We need to understand them before we can fight them, Alan told his growing group of resistors. Their technology, their weaknesses, their goals. We need to be smart about this. One of their first discoveries came from Daniel Green, a college biology professor who had managed to examine the body of an alien who had died in what appeared to be an accident. The alien's environmental suit had malfunctioned, exposing it to Earth's atmosphere. Their respiratory system is different from ours, Daniel explained to the group. Our air is toxic to them, specifically the nitrogen content. That's why they wear those suits. It's a weakness we might be able to exploit. Meanwhile, the aliens continued their systematic takeover of Earth. They didn't destroy human governments. They simply made them irrelevant. Local officials became administrators who carried out the collective's orders. Those who cooperated received privileges. Those who didn't were replaced. 1 month after the invasion, John Carter was assigned to work. In a food distribution center, the aliens had introduced new growing methods that increased crop yields dramatically, but all food was now controlled by them. John's job was to help distribute rations to the human population based on their labor category. He hated it. Every day, he had to look into the eyes of people receiving barely enough to survive while those who collaborated with the aliens got more than they needed. But the position gave him access to information, who was getting what, where resources were being allocated, and most importantly, the patterns of alien movement. John began passing this information to Alan's resistance group. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small act of defiance in a world where defiance seemed impossible. 6 months after the invasion, the first human workers, including Susan Miller, were transported off-world. The spaceport outside Chicago had grown into a massive complex where huge ships arrived and departed daily, carrying humans to labor colonies throughout the solar system and beyond. Susan's last glimpse of Earth was through a small window on the transport ship. The blue planet grew smaller as they accelerated away, and tears streamed down her face. She didn't know if she would ever see her home again. But as the ship entered faster than light travel, Susan made a silent promise. She would learn everything she could about the aliens. She would find ways to communicate with other humans, and somehow, someday, she would help take back her world. On Earth, the resistance was growing. Small acts of sabotage began to occur, disrupted supply lines, damaged equipment, missing inventory. Nothing big enough to provoke a major crackdown, but enough to show that humanity had not accepted its fate. We're in this for the long game, Alan told his followers. These aliens expect us to either submit or fight stupidly and get crushed. We're going to do neither. We're going to learn, adapt, and wait for the right moment. What the collective didn't understand, what would eventually become their greatest mistake, was that they had classified humans as simply adaptable labor units. They failed to recognize that this adaptability extended far beyond physical work. Humans had spent their entire history adapting, surviving, and overcoming. And now, faced with the greatest threat they had ever known, that history would become their greatest weapon. 5 years passed since the alien ships first appeared in Earth's skies. The collective's control had become the new normal for most humans. Cities still stood, but now they were divided into labor zones. People still worked, but for alien masters instead of human employers. Children still went to school, but they learned what the collective wanted them to learn. Lisa Chen cleaned the living quarters of high-ranking aliens on a luxury space station orbiting Saturn. The station served as a rest place for collective officials who supervised the mining operations on Saturn's moons. Lisa had been selected for this position because of her attention to detail and her small, nimble hands that could clean the aliens' delicate belongings without breaking them. The aliens saw her as something like furniture, present but not worth noticing. They spoke freely around her, never considering that she might understand their conversations. But Lisa had a gift for languages, and after 5 years, she understood much of the main collective language. Today, she was cleaning the private chamber of a conclave representative when 2 officials entered, not noticing her in the corner. "The human situation grows more complex," said the taller alien, its skin shifting to a worried purple color. "Labor efficiency is below projections on multiple worlds." "They resist in small ways," said the other alien. "Not enough to justify major action, but enough to concern the conclave. The 8 species who voted against their enslavement are saying they were right, especially the Arcturians." Lisa kept her head down, pretending to focus on cleaning while listening intently. "The Arcturians have always been paranoid," said the second alien. "They see threats everywhere. But what if they were right about the humans? What if classifying them as just another labor species was a mistake?" Lisa's heart beat faster. She had been sending information to the resistance through a network of human workers. But this was the most important thing she had heard yet. Some aliens had voted against enslaving humans, not out of kindness, but because they feared what humans might become. Millions of miles away, on a mining colony on Proxima Centauri b, Peter Johnson carefully watched the alien supervisor demonstrate the assembly of a new weapon component. Peter had been an auto mechanic before the invasion, and his mechanical skills had earned him a place in a weapons manufacturing facility. "The energy modulator must be calibrated precisely," the supervisor explained, not knowing that Peter understood far more than he let on. "One misalignment and the weapon becomes unstable." Peter nodded obediently while memorizing every detail. The aliens kept humans away from the actual weapons, using them only to create components. But Peter had been piecing together how these components fit into the larger weapon systems. That night, in the small sleeping quarters he shared with 20 other humans, Peter carefully drew diagrams from memory. The paper was smuggled, the pencil stolen. If caught, he would face severe punishment. But the information was too valuable. "I've figured out how their energy weapons work," he whispered to Susan Miller, who now worked as a systems analyst in the same facility. "The power source isn't what we thought. It's not fusion or anything like it. It's something new." Susan studied his drawings. 5 years in space had changed her. Her face was thinner, her eyes harder, but her mind was as sharp as ever. "If we could disrupt this connection here," she said, pointing to a spot on the diagram, "the whole system would fail." "Exactly," Peter said. "And the best part? The materials we need are in the mining waste they have us process." Back on Earth, Alan Reeves's resistance had grown into a network spanning several continents. They communicated using old radio technology that the aliens considered too primitive to monitor closely. They shared information, coordinated small acts of sabotage, and most importantly, studied their enemy. Alan met with his top lieutenants in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath what used to be downtown Chicago. The area above had been converted into a processing center for new human workers, making it the perfect hiding place. The aliens rarely looked directly under their own facilities. "We've learned something important," Alan said to the group. "The collective species have been at peace for so long that they've forgotten how to think like warriors." Karen Wright, who had worked as a translator before being assigned to the Conclave's central database, nodded in agreement. "Their weapons are designed for precision and efficiency. They want to disable, not destroy. They don't understand the concept of total war. And that's our advantage," Alan continued. "Humans have been fighting each other for our entire history. We understand violence in ways they don't, but their technology is still far beyond ours," said Jack Nelson, a former police officer. "Technology isn't everything," Alan replied. "History is full of advanced civilizations defeated by primitive ones who were more determined, more adaptable, or simply willing to sacrifice more." Karen had brought something else, data she had secretly copied from the Conclave's files. "They've been running tests on human biology," she explained. "They're surprised by our resilience. Most Conclave species evolved on planets with stable environments. They never developed our ability to survive extreme conditions." The group studied the information. The aliens found human endurance almost unbelievable. They were shocked that humans could continue functioning after injuries that would incapacitate their species. They couldn't understand how humans adapted so quickly to different environments, from the freezing mines of Europa to the burning surface of Mercury. They think it's a flaw, Karen said. They call it biological inefficiency. The fact that we have redundant systems, that we can survive losing blood, that we heal from wounds. Their bodies are more efficient, but less resilient. What about their psychology? Alan asked. Karen's expression became even more interested. That's the strangest part. They find human emotions disturbing, especially our creativity. They've been studying human art, music, and literature, and they're horrified by what they see. Horrified? By art? Jack asked. They don't understand imagination, Karen explained. The concept of creating something that isn't real frightens them. And the extremes of human emotion, love, hate, sacrifice, revenge, they classify these as mental disorders. Alan stood and paced the small room, thinking. So they don't understand our biology, they don't understand our psychology, and they don't understand warfare the way we do. There's one more thing, Karen said. I found records of the original conclave vote about Earth. The 8 species that voted against our enslavement. They didn't do it to protect us. They argued that humans were too dangerous to use as slaves, that we should either be left alone, or what? Alan asked. Or eliminated, Karen finished quietly. They called us a war species and said it was too risky to bring us into the galactic community. They were overruled because the other species saw us as a valuable resource. The room was silent as everyone absorbed this information. Finally, Alan spoke. They made a mistake, he said. They didn't enslave us because they thought we were weak. They did it because they didn't understand how dangerous we really are, and now we're going to show them. Across the solar system and beyond, humans continued to observe, learn, and communicate. The aliens had taken humans from Earth thinking they were getting simple laborers. Instead, they had spread millions of potential revolutionaries throughout their territory. In her quarters on the Saturn station, Lisa carefully encoded the information she had gathered and hid it in a supply container bound for Earth. On Proxima, Centauri B, Peter and Susan tested their first homemade explosive using materials stolen from the mining waste. And in tunnels beneath Chicago, Alan and his team began planning not just for resistance, but for liberation. The collective had classified humans as adaptable labor units, but they were about to discover just how adaptable humans could be. 10 years had passed since the collective first arrived on Earth. What began as small acts of resistance had grown into a coordinated global movement. Humans, once seen as just labor units by their alien masters, were proving to be far more troublesome than the conclave had expected. William Hayes had been a computer security specialist before the invasion. Now he worked as a maintenance technician on the collective's main communication hub in orbit around Earth. It was a job the aliens considered too basic for their own kind, keeping the physical systems clean and functional while their advanced AI handled the actual communication traffic. What the aliens didn't know was that William had spent years studying their technology. Humans weren't allowed to access collective computer systems, but William had watched, learned, and eventually found ways to tap into their networks without being detected. Today he was installing the final piece of his creation, a virus designed not to destroy but to gather intelligence. As he worked, he appeared to be simply checking connection points, his face blank and subservient. Inside, his heart raced with excitement and fear. Routine maintenance complete, he reported to his supervisor, an alien who barely acknowledged him. The supervisor waved a limb dismissively. Return to your station. William nodded and left, his work seemingly ordinary. But as he walked away, his virus began spreading through the collective's network, creating tiny openings in their security that allowed him to access information intended only for high-ranking officials. That night, in his small sleeping pod, William connected a device he had built from stolen parts to his work tablet. Information began flowing in: conclave meeting records, security reports, internal communications. What he found confirmed what the resistance had suspected. The collective was deeply concerned about the human problem. Reports described increasing unrest in labor colonies, unexplained equipment failures, and a troubling pattern of humans learning alien technology far faster than anticipated. Most concerning to the conclave was evidence that humans from different colonies were somehow communicating with each other, despite tight controls. William encrypted this information and sent it through a series of relay points to reach Earth's resistance. The method was slow and risky, but it worked. The resistance now had proof that their efforts were having an effect. On Mars colony, Amy Garcia was leading a different kind of resistance. As supervisor of the colony's life support systems, a position she had earned through years of demonstrated competence and apparent loyalty, she had access to the colony's most critical systems. Mars colony was valuable to the collective because it produced rare materials needed for their faster-than-light drives. Nearly 5,000 humans worked there alongside 300 alien overseers. Amy had spent years building a network of trusted humans throughout the colony. Each knew only a few others for security. Each had specific tasks and responsibilities. Today, after months of preparation, they were ready to act. In the main control room, Amy looked at her watch. It was time. She entered a series of commands into her console, then stood up calmly. "There's a problem with the oxygen recyclers in Section 4, she told her alien supervisor. "I need to check it personally." The supervisor made a gesture of approval, not concerned. Amy was considered a model worker, never causing problems. As she left the control room, a series of carefully planned events began unfolding across the colony. In the power plant, 2 engineers initiated a controlled shutdown sequence that looked like a system failure. In the security center, a technician accidentally spilled liquid into the main surveillance console. In the docking bay, workers began moving equipment in ways that effectively blocked access to the alien ships. Within 1 hour, Mars colony was under human control. The alien overseers found themselves confined to their quarters, their communications cut off and their weapons secured. Not a single shot had been fired. Amy addressed the colony through the internal communication system. "This is not a violent uprising," she said clearly. "No harm will come to our overseers if they remain calm. We have control of all life support systems. We are transmitting our demands to the conclave." Those demands were simple: better treatment for workers, the right to family units, and limited self-governance of the colony under collective oversight. They weren't asking for complete freedom, not yet. This was just the first step. Back on Earth, Alan Reeves received the news of the Mars uprising with satisfaction. "Phase 1 is working," he told his lieutenants. "Now we wait for their response." The collective's initial reaction was confusion rather than anger. Their security protocols were designed to prevent violent uprisings. They hadn't prepared for a non-violent takeover. More confusing to them was the humans' restraint. According to their understanding of predator species psychology, humans should have executed their overseers once they gained control. The conclave was divided on how to respond. Some wanted to retake Mars colony by force as an example to other human labor camps. Others pointed out that such action might damage the valuable facilities and cause production delays. While they debated, the resistance continued its work. Ryan. Clark worked on a collective science vessel studying Jupiter's moons. Like William and Amy, he had earned a position of limited trust. Unlike them, he had been directly communicating with some of the 8 species that had voted against Earth's enslavement. It had started by accident. Ryan had been assigned to assist a Tau Cetian scientist named Zorvak. The Tau Cetians, physically, resembled tall, thin humans with gray skin and large eyes. Of all the collective species, they were the most similar to humans in biology and psychology. "Your species adapts quickly," Zorvak had commented one day while they worked together. "Too quickly, perhaps." "We do what we must to survive," Ryan had replied carefully. "That is what concerns some of us," Zorvak said. "The conclave does not understand what they have done by spreading humans throughout our systems." That conversation had been the beginning of a secret alliance. The Tau Satians, along with the Arcturians and a few other species, had been watching, humans with growing concern. Not out of sympathy, but out of fear that the collective had made a serious mistake. Now, Ryan served as a link between Earth's resistance and these potential allies. Today, he had vital information to pass along. The Arcturians believe the Conclave will use force against Mars' colony, he told Alan through their secure communication channel. They are providing the locations of collective military vessels and weapons stockpiles. This information was priceless. It allowed the Resistance to plan their next moves with greater precision. On Earth, the Resistance had been manufacturing weapons using stolen collective designs modified with human innovations. The aliens had created elegant, efficient weapons. Humans made them destructive. We're almost ready, Alan told his global network of resistance cells. Phase 2 begins in 1 month. Phase 2 was more aggressive than the Mars uprising. Simultaneous actions would occur on every human labor colony, not to take control as Amy had done on Mars, but to demonstrate that humans everywhere could act in coordination. The message to the Conclave would be clear. Humans would never accept enslavement, no matter the cost. The plan required precise timing and communication between groups separated by vast distances. It should have been impossible under the collective's tight control. But humans had found ways to communicate that the aliens never anticipated, methods so simple and analog that they bypassed all advanced monitoring. As the day approached, the mood among the Resistance was tense but determined. They knew some would die, they accepted that risk. What they could not accept was a future of endless servitude. Remember why we fight, Alan told his people. Not just for ourselves, but for all humans, everywhere. We will show the galaxy that humanity cannot be broken. The collective had classified humans as labor units, resources to be used. They were about to discover that humans were something far more dangerous, a species that had evolved through conflict, adaptation, and an unbreakable will to be free. 20 years had passed since the arrival of the collective on Earth. What had begun as isolated resistance had transformed into a coordinated interstellar movement. Humans were no longer just fighting back, they were winning. The Galactic Conclave had called an emergency session. Representatives from all 284 member species gathered in their grand meeting chamber on a planet they called the Center, billions of miles from Earth. The massive room buzzed with nervous energy as the Supreme Council took their places. This session will address Resolution 12994, the recognition of Earth as a sovereign entity and the immediate cessation of forced labor practices, announced the head speaker, a tall being with crystalline skin that sparkled under the chamber. Light's Ambassador Zorthal, who had once explained to humans why their enslavement was legitimate under galactic law, now stood before his peers with a dire warning. His blue skin had paled with stress, and his large eyes darted nervously around the chamber. The human situation has escalated beyond our control, he said, his voice amplified throughout the chamber. Labor colonies are in constant revolt. Critical infrastructure is being sabotaged in ways our security systems cannot prevent. Most alarming, humans are reproducing and training their young in resistance tactics faster than we can respond. The assembly murmured anxiously. A representative from the Draconis system stood. These are just primitive beings. How can they cause such problems for the Conclave? Zorthal activated a holographic display showing a collective battlecruiser. 3 lunar cycles ago, this military vessel was taken by humans. A waste management worker named Ben Foster had, over several years, learned our systems well enough to override security protocols during crew rotation. The display showed the massive ship disappearing into faster-than-light travel. Humans now possess faster-than-light capability and weapons that could threaten Conclave homeworlds, Zorthal continued. They call themselves the Liberated Fleet. They have modified our weapons in ways our scientists don't understand. They operate with unified purpose despite having no centralized leadership. Why don't we simply destroy their home planet? Asked a representative from a warlike species. Without Earth, they would lose their will to fight. An Arcturian representative rose immediately. The Arcturians were one of the 8 species that had originally voted against Earth's enslavement. They resembled tall, slender humans with silver skin and 6-fingered hands. That would be our final mistake, the Arcturian said firmly. Our studies show that destroying Earth would not break the humans, it would unite them in vengeance. They have a concept called scorched Earth, where they destroy everything rather than let enemies have it. If we attack their homeworld, they will likely destroy everything they control, including vital conclave facilities. While the conclave debated, the human resistance was executing its most ambitious operation yet. In a precisely coordinated action, human operatives on 50 different worlds simultaneously disabled planetary defense systems for exactly 1 hour before restoring them. They could have bombarded these worlds into submission, but chose instead to deliver a message to each planetary government. We could have killed you. Remember that when you vote. The message sent shockwaves through the conclave. No species had ever managed to bypass so many security systems simultaneously. Even more disturbing to them was the restraint shown. The humans had demonstrated deadly capability but had chosen not to use it. They are forcing us to negotiate, said a Tau Cetian representative, one of the species secretly supporting the human resistance. Perhaps we should consider their demands. Back on Earth, Alan Reeves watched the conclave session through a feed provided by Williams virus in their communication systems. 20 years of resistance had turned Alan's hair gray, but his determination remained undiminished. They're afraid, he told his lieutenants, gathered in what had once been a luxury hotel, but now served as resistance headquarters. After years, in tunnels and hidden bases they now operated openly. The collective's control of Earth had weakened as they diverted resources to deal with uprisings across their territory. Do we trust them if they agree to negotiate? Asked Jack Nelson, who had been with Alan since the beginning. No, Alan replied. But we've always said our goal isn't revenge, it's freedom. If they're willing to recognize our sovereignty, we need to be willing to end this conflict. The conclave debate lasted 3 days. Finally, they reached a decision. The vote on Resolution 2994 was 284 to 0 in favor. All species, even those who had been most opposed to human freedom, recognized the new reality. Continuing the conflict would be more costly than accepting humans as equals. 2 weeks later, a conclave delegation arrived on Earth to negotiate peace terms. They landed near the old United Nations building in New York, which had been restored by the resistance as a symbol of human unity. The aliens expected to face angry humans demanding reparations and punishment. Instead, they were met by a delegation, led by Olivia Nelson, a former diplomat who had been selected as humanity's representative. We welcome you to Earth as equals, Olivia said as the aliens entered the negotiation room. We are prepared to discuss terms for lasting peace. The lead conclave negotiator, a being from one of the oldest conclave species, seemed confused. After what we did, enslaving your people, separating families, treating you as property, you offer peace rather than seeking revenge? Olivia smiled. That's another thing you never understood about humans. We can be your worst enemy or your greatest ally. We're giving you the choice. Is this what you call mercy? Asked the alien. Yes, Olivia replied. It's a human concept you might want to study. The peace terms were straightforward. Earth would join the conclave as an equal member with the same rights as founding species. All humans throughout conclave territory would be recognized as free citizens. In return, humans would share their innovations and creativity, working with the collective as partners rather than slaves. Some humans wanted more: punishment for those who had enslaved them, reparations for 20 years of forced labor. But the resistance leadership understood something important. True victory wasn't about revenge. It was about securing a future where humanity would never be threatened again. As the negotiations concluded, Alan Reeves stood at the window of the UN building looking out at the New York skyline. 20 years ago, alien ships had hovered there bringing enslavement. Now those same ships came in peace. Did we win? Asked Karen Wright, who had joined him at the window. We did more than win, Alan replied. We changed the galaxy. The Conclave has existed for thousands of years, and in just 2 decades we forced them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about species relationships. Within a year, the first human representatives took their seats in the Galactic Conclave. Within 5 years, human collective cooperation had yielded technological and cultural advances that benefited all species. The 8 races that had originally voted against Earth's enslavement were proven right. Humans were dangerous. But they had been wrong about one thing. Humanity's capacity for both violence and compassion made them not a threat to galactic stability, but its greatest hope. Susan Miller, who had been among the first humans sent to labor on other worlds, returned to Earth for the 20th anniversary of liberation. Now a respected engineer working on joint human-alien projects, she stood with Alan, Olivia, William, and other resistance leaders at a memorial ceremony. "I never thought I'd see Earth again," she said, her eyes filling with tears as she looked up at the blue sky. "I never thought we'd be free." "We were never meant to be slaves," Alan replied, "and now the whole galaxy knows it." The Conclave had learned a valuable lesson. Never enslave a species that knows both how to wage war and how to forgive. Never underestimate beings who have evolved through conflict, yet understand the value of peace. And most importantly, never forget that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe is hope. In the vast chamber of the Galactic Conclave, the Earth flag now hung alongside those of the other member worlds. Beneath it was inscribed a simple message in multiple languages. From slavery to partnership, a reminder that true strength comes not from domination, but cooperation. The galaxy had begged humanity for mercy, and humanity, in its wisdom, had granted it.